Bloody Roar 2. A well-known fighting game back then for its advanced fast-paced movements and especially due to its anthropomorphic or beast transformation of every character. You got your tough boxer Wolfman, an Asian lady that can turn into a bat, a self-centered scientist that turns into a chameleon, a female nurse that can turn into a rabbit, and other more interesting sets of characters out there. This is K1PM, and today I'll be doing a full review of an old classic fighting game on the PS1, going more in depth on the unique game mechanics, the story, the soundtrack, and the problems that are within the game, then compared to a few fighting games of its time.
Yugo the Wolf, Bakaru the Mole.
Here we go!
Get ready.
Bloody Roar 2 was developed by Hudson Soft in the year 1999. The Hudson Soft that also made these games in the past, before they went down on 2012 unfortunately. The game is the second installment and arguably the best one in the series. Considering most of the reviews and the sales they made on the other games, it didn't manage all too well compared to this one. The second game became a huge leap from their first Bloody Roar series, removing some of the characters out and bringing in some new ones instead, as well as improving the overall design of the game. The plot starts off 5 years later, after the collapse of Thailand Corporation during the first Bloody Roar game. Zoanthropes are humans who can transform themselves into a beast, became public worldwide after the police investigated the ruins and secrets of Thailand Corporation headquarters, that Gato himself successfully blew it up. Now faced with prejudice and oppression, they form an underground organization called the Zoanthrope Liberation Front or ZLF for short. It became the safe haven for all the Zoanthropes that were discriminated. Over time, the ZLF became an international terrorist organization, secretly led by Shenlong, forcing the Zoanthropes to align themselves to them through kidnappings and brainwashing, like the kidnappings of Yuriko's mother, and how the brainwashing worked on Kenji Ogami, or known as Bakuryu, to be an assassin for Busuzima's schemes. And yes, Kenji Ogami is the new Bakuryu on this game, the successor and student of old Bakuryu named Ryuzo Kato. The game didn't exactly explain it all too well, even playing both of the games, the first and the second. Each of the characters' stories revolves around the ZLF's affairs. Some of the characters are there on rescuing a person they care about, such as rescuing Bakuryu on Yugo's story, rescuing Yuriko's mother who was accompanied and trained by Long. Alice tries to chase Hugo out of concern of getting himself in danger from the ZLF. Sheena seeks the truth of what happened to his father getting accused as the ringleader for the ZLF. Jenny, as a typical legendary secret agent, seeks to test and guide the rest of the good guys, instructed by Gato himself. Stun seeks revenge for Busuzima's inhumane experiments towards the victims and Stun himself. Busuzima, as the villain of the story, has its own joke kind of story, beating everyone up one by one, till all of them decided to do the continue thing after a game over. Somewhat of a fourth wall kind of joke, but it's alright I guess. It kinda fits his character well for that kind of story. Gato himself ends up becoming the final test for most characters, to judge and guide them to their right path. Shenlong is the hidden leader of the ZLF, and a clone copy of Long, and also the secret final boss when beating Gato on the arcade mode without ever losing in the game once. It's a nice surprise to have this on the game, but at the same time, it's really difficult to pull it off. Once you lose to him, you can't actually re-battle him again. You gotta redo the whole arcade mode all over again. And that can be really frustrating for some people. The whole concept of the story itself is actually alright for a fighting game. They actually have a better narrative compared to the other fighting games of its time. And especially when you lose a match, it gives out an extra dialogue relating to the story. But the only problem is the delivery. I mean, just look at this. The lack of music, variety of sounds and effects what kills off the story instantly. Nobody would be that invested with a story with this kind of setup they made. I remembered the dialogues and endings from Guilty Gear and Tekken 3 back then, but Bloody Roar 2 on the other hand As much as how memorable the game is to me, I was really clueless about the story of it. The only things that I could remember was the characters, beast transformations, and that smooth voice actor who says the character's name during the loading screen. But the story? Not a single clue, to be honest. Like, sure, the hand-drawn scenes are actually alright, but the lack of atmosphere was really a bad choice they've done. It's disappointing that the game actually has a great soundtrack overall, yet they haven't put a single soundtrack within the story mode. It's just such a shame. What I like about the game's soundtrack is that there are two kinds you can hear it, depending on the selected options. Whether it'll be the console version, as in the character themes, or would be based on stage music instead, the arcade version of the game. The console version of the soundtrack somewhat lacks a bit of variety on the character themes. It's not the same way how Guilty Gear's soundtrack were made, comparing it to the PlayStation 1 of course. Now, I'm not just saying this out of pure personal favorites. Both of the games are a part of my childhood that I remember well. It's just that the lack of variety and distinction is a bit of a downside that Bloody Roar 2 has. The game has a total character roster of 11, 2 unlockable characters, and 9 available ones at the start. Most of the characters within the game comes with different kinds. Some specializes more in speed, some focuses on their technique and power, and the other ones, like Stun here for instance, focuses a lot more on grappling moves. Not only does every character has their own unique sense of fighting style, but how their inner beast as a Zoanthrope blends really well to their own. Although there's one character that does resembles a lot too much like the other. Shenlong the Tiger and Long the Tiger. I mean, it's reasonable considering Shenlong is a clone of Long, but as a character within a fighting game, it feels like the total character roster is up to 10 instead of 11 to be fair. Despite how some of their moves can vary a bit, most of their movesets are kinda pretty much the same thing. It's just that Shenlong has a lot more harder to block moves compared to Long's more heavier damage attacks. Although there's one thing that I really appreciate despite that problem, is that those two secret characters, Shenlong and Gado, has their own special set of story at the very least. Unlike how some of the other fighting games out there doesn't provide any additional dialogues and even endings for a secret character, like Guilty Gear on the PS1 for instance, unfortunately. Now, as a fighting game, the overall gameplay is actually great, despite how the controls is a bit different than your average fighting game. Normally, when in a fighting game genre, you usually have 4 or more sets of button attacks that a player could do, adding a few sets of combinations on the movements and attacks, and it'll all work out. It became the standard form of controls for most of the fighting games I've known, both at the arcade and the console. In Bloody Roar 2's case, it's rather a bit different. There's only 2 to 3 kinds of button attacks you can do. Square button for the punch, X button for the kick. There's also that triangle button, but it's just a combination of square and X. It's the same thing with L1, just with the added circle to do the special move more easily. But when your beast drive is up and ready, there's another circle button you could use for beast move attacks. Then again, it's not like you'll always be able to apply that attack all the time. Since when a player transforms into a beast with a circle button, the beast meter could easily go down depending on the number of strikes that a player could receive. While having a depleted meter then getting knocked down removes it completely, limiting the player's movements with only 2 sets of button attacks at a time, having much simpler fighting game controls. But surprisingly, even with that kind of concept they made, the game still plays really well. I know I'm getting a bit nitpicky here, but there's a reason why Tekken got so popular back then. It's the vast amount of combinations and movesets that Tekken has to offer. And in Bloody Roar 2's case, they kinda went with a more simpler set of controls and movesets available. Even by solely relying on those 2 button attacks, the game still offers an alright range set of unique combination attacks and movements, ranging from normal attacks, charge attacks, juggling, aerial recovery, a lot of unique grab attacks that you don't usually see in a fighting game for its time. Not to mention, each of the specialty of each character seemed absolutely great. It's kinda like more of a 2D fighting game kind of specials they have there, which is kinda pretty rare for a 3D fighting game back then. All of it sounds absolutely great when you first hear about it, but as a 3D fighting game, there's a bit of a problem that they kinda went with the wrong direction, and it's the sidestepping mechanic. It's true that the game actually has a sidestepping mechanic, both on every version of the game. But there's a problem. That sidestepping mechanic that they added is actually quite hard to do. Just imagine, when performing a sidestep move, a player must time it correctly when the opponent tries to strike in front. Kinda like performing a counter move, but with a much more lower time frame to be able to pull that off. What's worse is that when performing a sidestep move, you gotta double tap forward towards the enemy. It's just kinda like begging for a punch without having an absolute chance to possibly dodge an attack. It's just a bad design choice in my opinion. Although, to be fair, you'll probably be able to pull that off when getting caught by a barrage of combos from an opponent. But when trying to avoid the first strike, it kinda seemed rather risky to pull that off. It's kinda better just to guard it off. Now the graphics, however, is absolutely great. It's a huge improvement compared to what they did before. I love how they designed their characters really well, and especially along with their beast counterparts. And no, it's not just because of the whole furry thing. Even how the effects they use when striking in beast forms and specials look stunning. Also, I really like the idea of having different victory poses they do in the end, depending on the last move done. And surprisingly, some of the characters have hidden victory poses, like how there's a hidden victory pose by Hugo when doing an uppercut in the end. Not to mention how each of the characters' portrait looks amazing, instead of those 3D polygonal character portraits on the first game. It's a good thing they finally found a great illustrator by their side. And it's all thanks to Naochika Morishita. Although there's one thing that I really complain about. The translated versions of the game's main menu looks really ugly and almost like the same one on the previous game they have. While the Japanese version looks stunning and has a different variety of it, I still wondered why they end up removing that one instead. I know it's just a main menu kind of thing, but it kinda matters a lot when doing a first impression for the game. There's also that fun customization they added that changes the size and proportions of the character's body, which is kinda alright if a player's that bored, I guess. Kinda adds a bit of spice when you're playing the game. But what I really like about the customization is the number of rounds and difficulty setting available. At the very least, the game is still friendly towards those who aren't that used to fighting games and still wanted to play the game as it is. Now, the game isn't totally free without problems. Aside from that weird double front sidestepping mechanic that I mentioned a while ago, as a fighting game, they kinda left out the practice mode without any polish or effort to it. As soon as the player chooses and selects the characters within the practice mode, the player is only left with this one. No health bars, no damage counter, no hit meter, and worst of all, there's no in-game command list. It's such a shame they didn't put much effort into this part. You know, I appreciate it that the translated versions of the game have a built-in practice mode, unlike how the Japanese version has none of it. But at the very least, they should have at least put much effort into it. The handbook alone that comes within the game isn't exactly reliable to look up for movesets. And that's why I give this game a rating of 8.6 out of 10. Bloody Roar 2 is an exceptional fighting game, one of the best fighting game of its time, not only just because of the beast transformation of every character, but how creative the game can be on the characters' movesets and design within the game. It has a bit of flaws that are within the game, like the sidestepping mechanic thing, and how bad the delivery of the story can be. But the game itself is rather decent, as well as the overall design is really outstanding, especially for a 3D game on the PS1 era. Hudson Soft have really outdone themselves in creating one of the best fighting game of its time. It's unfortunate how the game went downhill on their next succeeding games. Hopefully, there's a spiritual successor that would take its place. So, what do you think about the video made? Be sure to leave a like and comment down below to help my growing channel out, and subscribe to stick around my channel for more game reviews such as these. This is K1PM, and I bid you farewell.